He wrote the songs we all know, the melodies that make us sing, dance, and cry. But nobody knew the man behind them. Neil Diamond's life wasn't glittering arenas or rhinestone shirts. It was struggle, heartbreak, and a fight to keep his voice alive. How did a shy kid from Brooklyn become one of the most iconic voices in history? And what price did he pay for the fame that millions adored? From lonely childhood days to battling Parkinson's at 84, this is the untold story of a legend you thought you knew. Fighting shadows, finding voice. Neil Leslie Diamond was born on January 24, 1941, in the Coney Island section of Brooklyn, New York. His father, Akiba, known as Kev, was a dry goods merchant who ran small neighborhood stores. His mother, Rose, was the daughter of Polish Jewish immigrants who had fled persecution in Eastern Europe with almost nothing. They arrived in America carrying hope and not much else. Kev's business was unstable. The stores would open, struggle, and close. The family would pack up and move, then do it again, and again. By the time Neil reached 12th grade, he had attended 9 different schools. 9! Think about what that does to a kid. 9 times being the new face in the hallway. 9 times trying to figure out where to sit at lunch. 9 times building something fragile, a friendship, a routine, a sense of belonging, only to have it ripped away. Neil would later describe it simply. He said he felt invisible. Not bullied, not hated, just unseen. Which, if you've ever experienced it, you know is worse. The family briefly relocated to Cheyenne, Wyoming during World War II while Kev served in the military. Young Neil fell in love with singing cowboy movies at the local cinema, heroes on horseback, soundtracks swelling over open plains. He sat in those dark theaters eating stale popcorn, dreaming of a life that felt nothing like his own. But Wyoming was temporary. Everything was temporary. They returned to Brooklyn, back to cramped apartments, back to the smell of dry goods and his father's worry about rent. Neil would later call Brooklyn a place of dragons and castles, but only the ones that existed in his mind. "We were 2 poor kids in Brooklyn," he once said about himself and his classmate Barbara Streisand. "We hung out in front of Erasmus High and smoked cigarettes. 2 future legends, both broke, both invisible, and both burning with something they couldn't yet name." The moment that cracked Neil's life open happened at Surprise Lake Camp in Cold Spring, New York. He was a teenager. Folk singer Pete Seeger performed at the camp, just a man with a guitar and a voice, standing in front of hundreds of strangers, making every single one of them feel seen. Neil had never witnessed anything like it. The connection, the power, the way music could reach across the space between people and close it completely. For his 16th birthday, Neil received a $9 acoustic guitar. It was cheap, the strings cut into his fingers, but it was his. He wrote his first song, a clumsy little thing called "Hear Them Bells." It wasn't good. It didn't matter, because in that moment, loneliness found a language. And Neil Diamond finally had something to say. The failure fueled his rise. After high school, Neil enrolled at New York University on a fencing scholarship. He was good, genuinely good. He competed as part of the 1960 NCAA championship fencing team. He was pre-med. He was going to be a doctor. His parents were relieved. Finally, a real career, a stable life. Then, during his senior year, just 10 credits shy of graduating, Sunbeam Music Publishing offered him a songwriting contract. 16 weeks, $50 a week. That's about $423 in today's money. Barely enough to eat. Neil took it. He dropped out of NYU, His father was devastated. His mother cried. But Neil couldn't explain to them what he barely understood himself. "I never really chose songwriting," he would later confess. "So it just absorbed me and became more and more important in my life." The work at Sunbeam was soul-crushing. He tailored songs to fit performers who could barely carry a tune. He wrote on demand, churning out melodies for other people's mediocre voices. After 16 weeks, Sunbeam didn't renew his contract. Just like that, done. What followed was the darkest stretch of Neil's young life. He rented a tiny storage room above the Birdland nightclub on Broadway. $35 a month. He dragged in a $30 piano and a pay telephone. He slept on a cot. He wrote songs in the middle of the night. Fingers numb from cold, stomach empty more often than full. He and his friend Jack Packer formed a duo called Neil and Jack. They released singles. Nobody noticed. Columbia Records signed him in 1962, or they released a single called Clown Town. It flopped. They dropped him. Rock bottom looked like this. A 22-year-old kid, newly married to his high school sweetheart Jay Posner. A baby on the way, sitting in a freezing storage room above a jazz club, wondering if he had thrown away his entire future for a dream that was never going to happen. But here's what separates the people who make it from the people who don't. Neil kept writing. Not because he was optimistic, not because he had a plan, because he didn't know how to stop. He took his demos to the Brill Building, the legendary Manhattan songwriting factory where Carole King, Burt Bacharach, and Neil Sedaka were crafting hits. And he played his songs for anyone who would listen. In 1965, Jay and the Americans recorded his song Sunday and Me. It reached number 18 on the charts. "I was born tonight," Neil whispered. Relief that felt like sobs. And then, the breakthrough that changed everything. The Monkees needed songs for their second album. Neil offered them a track called I'm a Believer. Released in November 1966, it rocketed to number 1. It became the best-selling record of 1967. Over 10 million copies sold worldwide. The kid from the storage room had just written the biggest song in America. From hotel room hymns. Writing hits for other people was one thing, but Neil Diamond wanted to sing. He needed to. The songs he was writing were pieces of himself, confessions wrapped in melody. And hearing someone else perform them felt like watching a stranger wear his skin. In 1966, Bang Records signed him as a solo artist. His first single, Solitary Man, became a hit. Listen to that title again. Solitary Man. This wasn't pop fluff. This was an autobiography. Cherry Cherry followed. Then Kentucky Woman. Neil Diamond wasn't just a songwriter anymore, he was a performer. And his sound, introspective, melancholic, achingly honest, was unlike anything else on the radio. By the late 1960s, he signed with Uni Records and moved to Los Angeles. And then came the song, the one that would follow him for the rest of his life. In 1969, Neil released Sweet Caroline. He wrote it in Memphis in less than an hour. The inspiration? He has given different answers over the years, but in 2007, he finally confirmed it was inspired by a photograph of a young Caroline Kennedy on horseback. Something about that image, innocence, warmth, the ache of something pure, unlocked the melody. Sweet Caroline became more than a hit. It became an anthem. It became the song that 50,000 strangers sing together at Fenway Park, arms swaying, voices cracking with joy. It became the song played at weddings and funerals and every moment in between. It belongs to everyone now, but it started with one lonely man in a hotel room, reaching for a feeling he couldn't quite hold on to. The hits kept coming. Cracklin' Rosie topped the charts in 1970. Song Sung Blue hit #1 in 1972. He played 7 sold-out concerts at the Greek Theater in Los Angeles in 1971, a record at the time. In December of that year, he signed a $5 million contract with Columbia Records, one of the largest deals in music history. Neil Diamond was no longer invisible, and he was one of the most famous musicians on the planet. But fame has a cost, and Neil was about to learn exactly how steep it was. 2 marriages, 1 man. Neil married Jay Posner in 1963. She was his high school sweetheart, a school teacher who believed in him when nobody else did. They had 2 daughters, Marjorie and Elin. But by 1967, the marriage was falling apart. Neil was on the road constantly. Jay was home with the children. The distance, not just physical but emotional, became a canyon neither of them could cross. They separated in 1967 and divorced in 1969. Within days of finalizing that divorce, Neil married Marcia Murphy, a television production assistant. For 25 years, Marcia was his anchor. She raised their 2 sons, Jesse and Micah. She turned down her own career opportunities to hold the family together while Neil chased melodies across the world. He thought Marcia was the answer, the person who would finally make the loneliness stop. But 25 years on the road takes something from a man that he can never give back. "I think a woman needs more attention than I was able to give," Neil admitted. He was always somewhere else, always writing, always performing. Present in body occasionally, but in spirit, somewhere inside a song. And then, his body betrayed him. In 1979, while performing on stage in San Francisco, Neil collapsed. He had been losing feeling in his right leg for years, but he ignored it, the way men of that generation ignored everything that frightened them. On that night, both legs gave out completely. He was rushed to the hospital. The doctors discovered a tumor on his spine. He endured a 12-hour surgery. For 3 months afterward, he was confined to a wheelchair. He didn't know if he would ever walk again. He wrote farewell letters to his friends. He was convinced he was dying. "I was so sure it was over," he later admitted. The rehabilitation was brutal. Physical therapy sessions that left him weeping from pain. Nights staring at the ceiling, negotiating with a body that wouldn't obey him. But slowly, agonizingly, impossibly, he regained his strength. Just months after learning to walk again, he began filming The Jazz Singer, a remake of the Al Jolson classic. The movie was critically destroyed, but it produced 3 top 10 hits. And it proved something to Neil that mattered more than any review. He was still standing. His marriage, however, was not. Marcia filed for divorce in 1995. The settlement was reportedly $150 million, one of the most expensive celebrity divorces in history. "She got enough to live on for the rest of her life," Neil said without bitterness. "She's worth every penny." He channeled the devastation into his album Tennessee Moon. "It helped me vent some of the feelings of guilt and failure I took on," he said. "It was better than going to a psychiatrist, more private." 2 marriages, 2 divorces, 4 children who grew up with a father who was always somewhere else. The symmetry of suffering was complete. "Both are spectacular women," he would say of Jay and Marcia. "I felt if I couldn't make something wonderful and lifelong happen with them, then maybe I wasn't capable of it." Final notes. Endless legacy. After Marcia, Neil carried the quiet conviction that love was something he simply couldn't do. That the loneliness wired into him since childhood was structural, part of the foundation, not just a crack in the wall. He had tried twice. He had failed twice. And both times, The failure wasn't dramatic. It was the slow, suffocating kind. The kind where you wake up one morning and realize the person next to you has been alone for years, even though you were technically in the same house. In 1996, he met Australian Ray Farley while performing in Brisbane. They were together for over a decade. It was warm. It was companionship. It was two people who enjoyed each other's company without the weight of expectations. But it never led to marriage. Neil was too scarred by then, so too aware of his own pattern. The way he loved music more than he could ever love a schedule, a dinner table, a quiet evening at home. He knew what he was. He just didn't know how to be anything else. Then, in 2007, everything shifted. He met Katie McNeil. She was a music manager, 29 years his junior, sharp, driven, deeply embedded in the industry. They worked together first, professional, boundaried, careful. But the walls didn't hold. Katie understood something that Jay and Marcia never had the chance to. She understood the industry itself. She didn't just love the man. She understood the machine he lived inside. The chemistry grew into something that couldn't be denied, Katie said later in an interview with The Telegraph. In September 2011, to Neil, a man who had publicly doubted his ability to sustain a relationship, announced their engagement on Twitter. They married in Los Angeles in 2012. With Katie, something fundamental changed. This wasn't just companionship, it was creative partnership. She co-produced the 2014 documentary, Hot August Night NYC, and worked closely on his career management. She didn't stand behind him or beside him in the decorative sense. She was in the room, making decisions, pushing back, holding him accountable. There's no better inspiration or motivation for work than being in love, Neil said during the press tour for his 2014 album Melody Road. I was able to complete the album under the spell of love, and I think it shows. For the first time in his life, Neil Diamond wasn't running from intimacy. He was building inside it. He needed that foundation, because the worst was still coming. In January 2018, just days before his 77th birthday, Neil released a statement that stopped the music world cold. He was retiring from concert touring. The reason? Parkinson's disease. Diagnosed recently, progressive, irreversible. A neurological disorder that would slowly dismantle his coordination, his balance, his motor control, and eventually, his ability to perform. The thing that had saved him from loneliness since he was 16 years old with a $9 guitar. It is with great reluctance and disappointment that I announce my retirement from concert touring, the statement read. I have been so honored to bring my shows to the public for the past 50 years. Gracious words, measured words, and words that barely held together under the weight of what they actually meant. That the stage, the only place Neil Diamond had ever felt fully alive, was being taken from him. For 2 years, he lived in denial. When the doctor told me what it was, I was just not ready to accept it, he told Gayle King on CBS Sunday Morning in 2023. I said, "Oh, okay, I'll see you whenever you want to see me, but I have work to do, so I'll see you later." He buried himself in routine, refused to slow down. Classic Neil, running from pain the only way he'd ever known how. But Parkinson's doesn't negotiate. It doesn't wait for you to be ready. And slowly, over the next 5 years, acceptance crept in. Not all at once. Not with a moment of revelation. More like a tide. Somehow, a calm has moved into the hurricane of my life, he said in that same 2023 interview. Things have gotten very quiet. I find that I like myself better. I'm easier on people. I'm easier on myself. And the beat goes on, and it will go on long after I'm gone. Then came the night that proved he meant it. In December 2022, the Broadway musical A Beautiful Noise, based on his life, premiered at the Broadhurst Theatre in New York. On opening night, Neil was in the audience. The cast performed his catalog. The story of his life played out under stage lights: Brooklyn, the Brill Building, the heartbreak, the glory. And then, without announcement, Neil Diamond rose from his seat. He walked to the stage, and with the cast surrounding him, he sang Sweet Caroline. His voice was thinner, his body is slower, his hands trembled. But when those first notes landed, and the entire theater joined in, strangers singing together, some of them crying, it didn't matter. Because the connection was still there. The same connection Pete Seeger had shown him at Surprise Lake Camp 60 years earlier. A man, a song, a room full of people who, for 3 minutes, didn't feel alone. "I can still sing," Neil said afterward. "I've been doing it for 50 years, and I enjoy it. It's like all the systems of my mind and my body are working as one." At 84, that's still true. Quieter now, slower, but it's true. Neil Diamond gave the world more than songs. He gave it pieces of his soul, moments of understanding, and a lifeline to anyone who ever felt invisible. But what happens when the voice that has carried so many through their darkest hours begins to fade? When the man behind the melodies faces the quietest battles of all, who will hear him now? The story is far from over, and the next chapter may reveal truths that even the music can't prepare us for.